Hey guys, welcome. I hope you're all good. Today I'm going to be answering a question that I get from a lot of you, which is what lens should I buy for the Sony E-mount system? So I'm going to try and answer that by talking about my experience with the system and the lenses I've used, and in particular 3 really good value lenses that I own and I use all the time for both personal and professional work, and yeah, even for YouTube as well. So let's get straight into it. In terms of lenses, you can spend an awful lot of money on lenses and it can really add up quickly, and things like the Sony G Master lenses cost so much money that I think you've got to really do your research on lenses before you buy them and work out what you're going to use them for, how much you're going to use them, and whether you really need it in your bag, because over time, as you grow, you will realise that some lenses you just end up not using because you use other ones instead. So to give you a bit of background to what I do, I shoot both stills and video, so I'm a hybrid shooter, but I started out as a photographer only, doing landscape and architecture stuff. I then moved into more people, so portraits, events, headshots, all that kind of stuff. Even done a few weddings in my time. And in the last probably 2.5 years, I've moved over a bit more to doing video work as well. So I do quite a lot of corporate conferences, events, done a couple of weddings for video, and yeah, just generally I use it for YouTube and product photography and product video stuff. So yeah, kind of a real mix of stuff that I do, and so I need versatile lenses that can help me perform all of those tasks. And I think that's what lenses really are. They're tools for us to help us achieve the images we want, whether that's stills or video. And I'm going to be talking about each of the lenses, both for stills and video, but I'll try and put timestamps for particular bits where if you just want to know what it's like for stills or for video. So first of all, I want to talk about the Tamron 17-28. It's a lens that I've had for about 10 months now, and I just use it all the time for YouTube or corporate work. It just stays in my camera bag the whole time because it's so useful. Such a versatile focal range. It's not quite as wide as the 16-35, but the 17-28 means that it is very lightweight and compact for the type of lens it is, and it is a 2.8 throughout the zoom range, which is great if you're shooting events and you need to shoot in low light, indoor architecture stuff. So if you're doing real estate, it's really good for that, for both stills and video. I've used it for both and had excellent results out of it. And similarly for weddings or events where you want to take environmental portraits, where you want to show the backdrop or the environment that you're shooting in, it's really good for that as well. It's pretty sharp. It's pretty good in terms of autofocus. It's quite smooth in terms of video and pretty snappy when it comes to photos. I did do a video on this when I first got the lens, so check that out above. I'll try and link it in the description as well. But essentially, I've been really impressed with this. It's $799 I paid for it. And for that, you're getting a lot of lens for your money. It's great for gimbal work. I've used this for corporate stuff on a gimbal a lot, and because the barrel doesn't extend like the 16-35 Sony f4, you don't have to worry about rebalancing your gimbal. You can just stick it on, and it's just great for anything like that because of the wide aperture and because you have quite a close focusing distance. I'll put it up on screen, the specifications of it, but you can get right in on a subject and it will still focus. So it's really versatile in that respect. I've even used this for like fast action sports like mountain biking, for the wider shots where I'm kind of really close into the rider as they come through a corner or a turn, and you kind of want to get everything in frame, and I'll show you a couple of examples of that. The negatives about this lens are that the zoom and the focus rings are the other way around on Tamron lenses compared to quite a lot of lenses, and I don't really like that. It kind of annoys me a bit, but you do get used to it. The zoom ring is a decent size. The focus ring is a little bit smaller. It's okay, but it's not great. You also don't have any switches on the lens or buttons, so there's no like MFAF switch or focus hold buttons or anything like that. So it's a pretty stripped back lens, but it does its job really well, gives really good results both for stills and video. And in terms of price, I mean, the other lenses, I'm just looking at my notes, in this category, you've got a Sigma 14 to 24 2.8, which is $1,299. That's a great lens, I think, for stills, but I didn't buy it because I was concerned about the reviews I'd seen for it for video. I don't think it's necessarily as good for video. And then the Zeiss Batis 18mm, which I actually gave away to one of you guys in my 500 subs competition. I did use that a bit for corporate stuff, but I found it a bit limiting just having a single focal length. And actually I find when you're on a gimbal, it's good to be able to have kind of that zoom, so long as it doesn't unbalance the gimbal. Similarly for stills, it's just useful to have a bit of a zoom when you're shooting wide on one camera and then kind of cropped in more telephoto on another camera. It can really be useful to have that zoom range. The other options that are available, which are comparable, are the 16 to 35 f4, which is the Sony one, which I just don't think is that good a lens. I've used it a few times. I've never owned it. It's something I don't like about it in terms of the image quality that comes out of it. And I think just for the money, it's like £1,100 or dollars. And I just don't think it's worth it for the money. And it's an f4, so you're not getting as wider aperture. So for low light, it's not going to be as good. And then the GM lens, so the G Master, is almost £2,000. So it's just a huge chunk of money. It's a much heavier, bigger lens. I have used it and I thought it was good. I thought it was sharp. I used it, I think, for a couple of stills shoots where I was doing events, and it was really good. But if I'd had this lens, I just wouldn't have bothered. I ended up hiring it, and I thought it was good, but I just don't think it's worth paying that kind of money unless you've got money to burn. You can pick up one of these and it will give really good results on a budget, and that's kind of, you can spend the money elsewhere on other camera bodies or other equipment, lighting, you know, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, overall I love this lens. I think it's brilliant. It's been used so much and so versatile that I'm really glad I bought it. The second lens that I'm going to talk about is the Sony Zeiss 55mm. This is a older lens that was released pretty soon after the sort of E-mount system got going, but it is a really nice lens and one that I've owned twice now. Actually, I bought it when I got my A7R II about 4.5 years ago, and then I decided I didn't need it at the time, and then bought it about a year or so ago. Had a load of equipment stolen, and this was one of the lenses that I bought as part of replacing my equipment. And when it was new, it was about 800, I think, and now it's down to about 500 or 600. I'll put the price on the screen now, but yeah, I think it's really good value for money because it is a very sharp lens. It's one of the sharpest lenses I've used for the Sony system, and look how small it is. It's really compact, really just, you keep this in your bag all the time. You barely notice it in terms of weight and size. And it's Zeiss, which, you know, what more do you need to say? You've got the quality and the image quality and the sharpness there. Things I really like about it are that it's just a very natural focal length. So I've used it again. It's been very versatile for me. I've used it for anything from like weddings to corporate events to private events like parties, conferences, detail shots at events. So yeah, used it for like product B-roll, product shots, like stills shots as well. So yeah, also used this for headshots as well. And what's nice about this is because it's 55, when you use it on a crop sensor Sony body, or you just use it in crop mode on a full frame body, it's actually about an 82.5mm. So you're getting essentially an 85mm lens almost and a 50 in one lens, which I think is really good. And I've used it on a gimbal at conferences, and it gives a really nice parallax effect compared to like if you're using like the Tamron, which is a much wider angle. This lens gives a really nice effect and knocks out the background really well because it's 1.8 aperture. Is nice and wide, but it's still small and compact compared to like the 1.4 aperture lenses that Sony do. So two things I don't love about it are minimum focusing distance is 0.5 meter, so what's that, 1.64 feet. So it's not great for that, but it's okay. And obviously there's no stabilization in this lens. I don't think it really matters much with this particular lens because it is such a wide aperture, but you know, there are other lenses out there that offer stabilization. So overall, a fantastic lens. Sorry, the other thing I should mention is it's quite a small filter thread size. It's 49, which is pretty tiny, which is good because the filters are cheap, but compared to like other lenses I have, it's quite a lot smaller. Most of my lenses are either 67, 72, or even 82. So it's harder to use like step up and step down rings with them, with this lens. But yeah, it comes with a nice hood, which is decent, and yeah, build quality of this lens is pretty decent. Focus ring is really smooth, and yeah, focusing is really nicely. It's snappy to focus both in stills and autofocus in video is pretty decent as well. Pretty quiet for autofocus. Just overall really good value package of a lens. In terms of the price, compared to other things on the market, you get like the 50mm 1.4 that Sony does is $12.99. So this is like $5.50. I think you can pick it up in the UK some places for like $5.39 now. Similarly, Samyang do one, which is a 1.4, which is $569. I don't think the quality is quite as good, and I found Samyang lenses, I used the 35-1.4, and that seemed very noisy when autofocusing, and the autofocus wasn't as good on it as like native lenses. I haven't used the 50mm, but I'd imagine you might have the same issues. Sony do a 50mm 1.8, but it's a really cheap £165 lens. So if you're on a budget, maybe look at it, but I would, if you can afford to, I would step up to this, because that lens, I haven't tested it, but it's got some pretty mixed reviews, shall we say, and I think it's not a great lens optically. So yeah, it's definitely for the money, this is really good value, I think, and definitely a lens that just stays in my bag all the time because of its size. So the last one I wanted to talk about was this, which is the Sony 85mm 1.8, and again, it's a prime lens. You're getting that prime look from this lens. Again, it can be used as either an 85, or if you're on a crop body, it can be 127.5, so close to a 135 focal range, and that's really nice when you're using it for either headshots or any kind of portraits. And I've used this for interviews for corporate work where we're videoing someone with two cameras, and the A cam is nice, sort of a wider shot, and then this has been the B cam. This has been tight headshot, knocking out the background, and it looks really, really nice and works really well. Minimum focusing distance on this is 0.8 meters, so about 2.5 feet, which I think is pretty standard for an 85. I think the GM version is similar, and I'm not sure about the Batis. I did own the Batis for quite a while, and actually this lens and the 55 I bought to replace the Batis because it was stolen along with a load of other equipment a couple of years ago. And I picked up both of these for not much more. I think I only paid about £200 more than if I'd just replaced the Batis, so that's definitely something to consider. This is a very sharp lens. I'd say this is a bit sharper than the G Master 1.4 85mm. Certainly the versions I've used of them, I've only hired that lens, I've not owned it, but I'll put up a couple of images I took with that lens, and obviously images I've taken with this lens. It's got 9 rounded blade aperture, it comes with a nice hood, which is sort of decent size and still doesn't make the lens too big. And the other things that I like over the Batis is that it's got a AF/MF switch and one of the focus hold buttons which you can actually customize. So I've customized that to eye autofocus for portraits, and it works really, really nicely. The thing I didn't like about the Batis was there was no buttons or anything on it. So the downsides to this lens, I would say, are it's not as well weather sealed as the G Master lens or the Batis, but it is dust and moisture resistant, so it's still decent. The focus ring is okay, but like all of these kind of fly-by-wire electronic focus lenses, they're not as nice to focus in video as manually focused lenses or the kind of old style lenses, but you do get used to that. Similarly, there's no image stabilization in this lens, same as the 55, but you don't necessarily need it, I don't think, if you've got in-body stabilization in your cameras. And again, in terms of kind of value for money, this is currently coming in at under $550 in the UK and about $598 in the US, so really good value when you compare it to like the GM lens. I think the G Master is $14.99 currently with like cashback offers. The Batis is just over 1,000, somewhere between 1,000 and 1,100. So I think you're getting a really good value lens for the money. The only other one I would look at if you're thinking about getting an 85mm for Sony is the Viltrox, which I think is also a 1.8. I've not tested that lens, but I know Chris Brockhurst did a video on his channel comparing this to the Viltrox, and he thought the Viltrox was pretty damn close in terms of image quality and value for money. It's like $398, I think, so it's quite a bit cheaper. So if you are on a budget, that's definitely worth looking at. But yeah, overall I think this is a really decent lens for the money, and definitely one that I use a lot and stays in my camera bag a lot. The only other one that I haven't talked about, which I'll grab now, is this Sony 70-200. This is the f4G version, which has got OSS. I'm going to do a separate review of this lens versus the new Tamron one, which has just come out, which I think is a 70-180, and that's a 2.8 throughout the zoom range. So yeah, look out for that video coming in the next few weeks. Once I can get hold of the Tamron, I think I'm going to hire it and do a comparison. But yeah, I mean, I use this a lot. Use it for sports, so mountain biking, photography, golf photography. Use it for corporate stuff. I have used it for weddings and conferences, all these kind of event sort of things that I do, both for stills and a little bit for video. I do use this for video as well, not so much as the kind of primes, but it's a really good lens and definitely one to consider. But in terms of value, it's maybe not the best value. I think there's other options that are now coming out that might be better value, so I didn't include it for that reason, but I will do a separate video on it, so look out for that one. I hope you found this video helpful. If you've got any questions about the specific lenses I've talked about, put them down in the comments. I'll try and answer them. If you want me to do a actual kind of in-depth review video on any of these lenses, let me know and I will do that. I just thought it would be useful for any of you guys getting into the E-mount system, either with an A7III or one of the newer cameras. Maybe you're going to get the A7SIII when it comes out. It's definitely, these lenses are worth considering, and hopefully you found it helpful. If you did enjoy this video, please do click the like button down below. Consider subscribing to the channel and hitting that bell for notifications of new videos as and when they come out. And yeah, any comments you got, drop them down below. I'll try and answer them, and I look forward to seeing you next time.